The Cold War, one of the most intense and dangerous periods in modern history. It wasn't a war with guns and bombs. Instead, it was a battle of ideas, power, and influence between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Let's break it down and understand how this global tug-of-war shaped the world we live in today. Our story starts in 1945, as World War II ends. The Allies, countries like the US, the Soviet Union, and Britain, defeated Nazi Germany. But once the war was over, cracks began to show. The US and the Soviet Union were allies during the war, but they didn't trust each other. The US believed in democracy and capitalism, where people could own businesses and choose their leaders. The Soviet Union believed in communism, where the government controlled everything and everyone shared resources. These two ways of life couldn't be more different, and soon they were competing to prove which system was better. After the war, Europe was in ruins. The US helped rebuild Western Europe through something called the Marshall Plan, giving money and support to countries like France and Germany. But the Soviet Union took control of Eastern Europe, turning countries like Poland, Hungary, and East Germany into communist states. This created a divide in Europe. The West was capitalist, and the East was communist. At the center of this divide was Berlin, a city split into East and West. The Berlin Wall, built in 1961, became a powerful symbol of the Cold War. The Cold War wasn't just about politics. It was also about weapons. Both the US and the Soviet Union started building huge stockpiles of nuclear bombs. Each side wanted to be stronger than the other, and this created fear around the world. The idea was called mutual assured destruction. Basically, if one side attacked, the other would strike back, and both would be destroyed. It was a dangerous game, but it stopped either side from using their weapons. The competition didn't stop with weapons. The US and the Soviet Union also raced to explore space. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit Earth. This shocked the US, and they quickly stepped up their space program. In 1969, the US landed astronauts on the moon, with Neil Armstrong famously saying, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The space race wasn't just about science. It was about showing the world who was more advanced. Even though the US and the Soviet Union never fought directly, they supported opposite sides in other countries' conflicts. These were called proxy wars. In Korea, the North was backed by the Soviet Union and China, while the South was supported by the US. The Korean War ended in a stalemate, with the country still divided today. In Vietnam, the US fought to stop communism from spreading. But after years of fighting, they had to pull out, and Vietnam became a communist country. The Middle East, Africa, and Latin America also became battlegrounds for these proxy wars, with the superpowers fighting for influence. One of the scariest moments of the Cold War happened in 1962. The Soviet Union secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US. When the US found out, the world came close to a nuclear war. After tense negotiations, the Soviets agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for the US promising not to invade Cuba. It was a close call and showed just how dangerous the Cold War could be. The Cold War wasn't just fought overseas. It affected people's lives at home, too. In the US, there was a fear of communist spies, leading to the Red Scare. People were investigated, and some even lost their jobs because they were suspected of supporting communism. In the Soviet Union, the government controlled information, and people couldn't speak out against the system without risking punishment. Both sides lived under constant tension and fear. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was struggling. Its economy was weak, and people were unhappy. A new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced reforms to make the country more open and modern. In 1989, communist governments in Eastern Europe started collapsing. The Berlin Wall fell, and Germany was reunited. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself broke apart, ending the Cold War. The US was now the world's only superpower. Even though the Cold War ended, its effects are still with us. The arms race left the world with thousands of nuclear weapons. Countries like North Korea and Iran continue to spark fears about nuclear conflict. The Cold War also shaped modern politics. NATO, an alliance of Western countries, and Russia still have tensions, and space exploration, which started as a Cold War competition, continues to push humanity forward. The Cold War was a battle of ideas, but it also showed how dangerous competition can be. It reminds us of the importance of diplomacy and understanding. Thank you for watching this documentary. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories that shaped our world.